Alt 5 Sigma acquired these tokens at a 20-cent valuation. If you take the simple average of the pre-market trading, Joe, you come up with a valuation around 56 cents.
And now, as we sit here looking at where it's trading again on the candle chart, 22 cents. And so at 22 cents, we are very close to seeing it trade exactly where they were supposed to get it on the cheap. And so if it falls below that, they didn't even get anything good out of this inside kind of one entity to one entity transaction. Welcome everybody into another episode of Coinage. I'm your host, Zach Guzman, coming to you live from our Brooklyn studios here in New York City. Excited to have you back with us live as we are again covering all the big headlines in and around Web3, including the launch of the token powering the Trump's World Liberty Financial Project. We're going to dig into that as we dropped our big documentary into exactly how that project has risen to fame. Perhaps not surprising. A lot of it has to do with President Trump himself and the USD1 stablecoin, which if you haven't watched yet, I would highly encourage you to do so. We tried to be as neutral as possible with that one. But of course, now, since the token has launched, it's raising new questions about where we are in this cycle, whether we're too stretched when it comes to liquidity, because we got a lot of things cooking, folks. I mean, if you're just waking up to what's going on right now, you've got not only the stable coins themselves as USD1 goes up with USDC and Tether, but those respective stable coins themselves also working on their own blockchains. What's that going to mean for the ETHs, the Solanas of the world, as some of that starts to get stretched across all these ecosystems? There's just a lot of questions about whether or not too much is sucking up too little money in the space right now. And of course, we are entering September, otherwise known as Downtember, in what has been a historically tough period of time for crypto. So try to synthesize all of that on the show today. No doubt a lot to get into, as again, same theme in the public markets. Also, liquidity potentially getting stretched as Gemini steps up to the plate. That might be the antithesis of what I just said, because lo and behold, we could potentially see an IPO gives them a valuation north of $2 billion. So we're going to dig into that one as well, because depending on how you feel about the Winklevoss twins, that company and where it's at right now with stacking net losses may be surprising to see some of the strength as that one comes out into the public market. So a lot to get into, but we might as well kick off the show with a little bit of a look at why so many people are afraid of Downtember. As we look at this historical chart from our friends over there at CoinGlass, these are, of course, the numbers that, everyone kind of has in their head for exactly why there's still excitement around Q4 of this year. Historically, a very strong time, and it's especially been the case in these last two Q4s, whether it's 23 or 24, 56%, 47%, big question mark around what Q4 is going to look like. But of course, before we get there, we've got to talk about September. And interestingly, not so bad when you look at these bad boys, but if you go back further, you see a lot of red in the month of September. And that is kind of why people are afraid of this month. Same thing for, I think if we switch over, where is it? Where are we going here? Where are we going here, Texas? That's the real question. What's going on? I guess they don't have it for ETH. Interesting. Okay, fair enough. But I mean, that's kind of the big question. And maybe you can look at Q3 over here. A lot of the red, at least for Ethereum on that side, due to what happens in September. And so you could be optimistic. You could say, who cares, Zach? It's September. Who cares? It's the summer doldrums. Why do you care about that when we're just going to have a strong Q4? And that may be the case. And of course, just because that's historical precedent doesn't mean that September needs to be bad, which we're going to get into. There is a little bit of uniqueness around where we're at, just how much money is flowing into these digital asset treasury companies. Some big announcements today from the likes of Joe Lubin's SharpLink Gaming, as well as a few other ETH ones to get into. And of course, as always, Saylor's buying up on the Bitcoin side. So what does that all mean? Well, why don't we kick off the show with a little clip from our friend Anthony Scaramucci, who had come by just last week to, I guess, give people a shot of optimism if you need it. By the way, things aren't that terrible. Just to take a look at, I'm remiss Texas, I'd be remiss if I didn't look at the charts as we kick off the show, by the way. Just looking at where we are trading right now, sure, we've had some softness. There's always going to be a little bit of retreats. But if you listen to Tom Lee, who focuses now, obviously, in running one of the larger Ethereum digital asset treasury companies, focuses his time more so on the ETH chart. And if you think about maybe where we're at, a little bit of a healthy pullback, some consolidation, as he says, all steady as she goes, much to be expected, just a little bit of a healthy pullback. And the same thing we heard from Anthony Scaramucci on Coinage last week. If you haven't watched that interview, a lot of great tidbits from the Mooch, not just in terms of where he sees, the space continuing to churn and some altcoin predictions that he had, whether it's Solana or Avalanche. But the granddaddy of them all, we had to ask him about where he sees Bitcoin going, and he's very much still in the bull camp. Take a listen to what the Mooch told us. What's kind of the peak you see before potentially that correction comes?
Well, I mean, again, that's the bull case, right? So the bull case is there's $1 trillion on the way. It's going to push Bitcoin to $1 million a coin. I think you could go on ChatGPT or Grok and you could ask Grok, what is the coefficient ratio? Meaning, if a dollar comes into Bitcoin, how does it affect Bitcoin's price? And so if $1 trillion comes into Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is fairly thinly traded, how much will it push up the price? It's not going to push it up $1 trillion. It could probably push it up closer to $2 or $3 trillion. So, that would imply valuations, close to $500,000 a coin. And, could that happen? I mean, I do believe that can happen, but I also think we're still in the nascent era of Bitcoin. People say, well, are you early? Yeah, we're early. 98% of the people that Morgan Stanley survey are at zero. And let me just repeat that. They're at a 0% allocation of Bitcoin.
So if you listen to that, a 0% allocation of Bitcoin, obviously still a long ways to go. And of course, I guess kind of the things that we're watching is the Solana ETF potentially on its way. You've got the DATs, which we're going to get into, and we've got other ways for some of these companies now. Basically, the same thing that happened with the ETFs is, hey, look, do you really want to get your wallet? Do you really want to go down this rabbit? Our institution's going to do that. Basically, we got our answer. It's just, hey, the ETFs are a pretty simple way to handle all this. But for everything else that's more on-chain, do you want to do that? Can ETFs even do it yet? We've seen the SEC, surprisingly, even with Paul Atkins coming in, taking their sweet time, trying to get some of these things approved. And so, I don't know. I think it's a very interesting kind of spot to be in, especially as, again, President Trump and their family on the pro side continue to push a lot of this and say, look, it's fair game. And the next big focus is in the Senate, which we're going to be covering, no doubt, on Coinage for quite some time as we wait to see what happens with the Clarity Act. But that could be another huge shot in the arm, depending on how long it takes. So there's a lot of, I guess, positive things still to come that can still make this true, that you could see exactly what the Mooch just told us, which is 500K on Bitcoin over a long enough time horizon. His point, as we got into in that interview, is that you never know when potentially some of this enthusiasm could shift. And as we'll get into in a second, maybe perhaps cracks starting to form based on the World Liberty Financial launch, just based on how hot it was supposed to be and how cold the launch has been. But we're going to get into that a little bit later on in the show. For now, why not get you caught up on what we're seeing play out when it comes to a lot of the DATs, because there are a few that we haven't talked about in a while. One of them on the ETH side being Joe Lubin to SharpLink Gaming. Of course, they've had a few people join that company recently, including BlackRock's former crypto-focused mind. And on that front, you're seeing there from our friends at The Block covering Joseph Lubin, SharpLink Gaming, adding $177 million worth of ETH. That gets them to 837,000 ETH. And on that front, I think it's important to highlight here that, they've been trying to keep pace with their competition, which is, of course, Tom Lee's BitMine Immersion Technologies. And I want to pull up kind of the charts because our friend who made this site, the Strategic Reserve site, of course, he included Coinage in there, which always an honor to be included on these things and to have Coinage represented on these things as well. Pretty cool to see the constant updates that are always there around where these different reserve companies stand. And as you see there with SharpLink's latest addition, they're close, but the lead that Tom Lee has stacked at BitMine continues to grow. You can see there it's widening quite a bit. And also their MNAV. I think this number is going to be updated. Of course, all of these numbers change constantly as they publish how much ETH they got and where their stock is. But nonetheless, it's Tom Lee's game. And it's BitMine continuing to run with it, even with those additions. There's another name on there, though, you'll see in third place, not to be outdone, that has news of their own, which is pretty interesting because it's not too dissimilar from the first deal that we saw from the ETH Foundation, in which the ETH Foundation gave directly to one of these DATs, and kind of similar news to highlight for the Ether Machine, the other one, also from the block. The Ether Machine raising another $654 million worth of ETH as their holdings approach 500K. And this one's interesting because they kind of announced it in part with a huge OG in the space, Jeffrey Burns. 150,000 ETH transferred over there in what is the largest follow-on investment of any crypto treasury company thus far. So that's what's going on over there. And I think there's this other chart. We got to credit the block because they've become somewhat of a DAT publication, I suppose, here in Texas. If we bring up their chart, stacking all this up with data from my alma mater, Yahoo Finance. Pretty interesting to see the amount, the sheer amount. Some might say that this is an exponential increase. And, you didn't really need to be a master at algebra or calculus to know that that is pretty impressive and or scary, depending on how you want to look at it. But DATs continue to stack. Ethereum. Other people on Twitter were noting that this is just kind of the banks getting people to part ways with their ETH. Of course, the demand suck right now is just, what's it going to look like as people who hold ETH don't want to give it up? Where is this all going to come from? You might have your one example there from the Ether Machine saying that they're just going to go to big ETH OGs and ask them to get some ETH, or, go to the ETH Foundation. But what's that chart going to look like? What's the price going to look like, I think, is the big question. If you do get into the chance or into the arena where, look, price is going to have to go up if you're going to want people to part ways with their ETH. And that's the same thing that Michael Saylor's always talked about, which might be a good transition over there on the Bitcoin side, because guess who's back to buying, baby? It's none other than our friend, Michael Saylor. By the way, if you're liking this, go ahead and throw a like on the stream. Go ahead and retweet it. Get some more people in here. It's fun. It's more fun. By the way, comment on this. If you're like, hey, Zach, like the shirt. Hey, thanks. It's a nice shirt. If there are other things you want to know, let us know in the comments. But I do want to bring up Michael Saylor's latest tweet because he revealed exactly how much they just got back to buying. And it's a pretty large number considering some of his smaller recent buys. $449.3 million to be exact. Average price per Bitcoin, $110,981. And kind of just goes to show that we're still churning along, not to be forgotten over there on the Bitcoin side of digital asset treasuries, the man who started the trend. Saylor still growing confidence over there. And just taking another look back at the chart here, the reason why he may be buying is because he is predicting perhaps, again, this run you just heard from the Mooch, back to 500K. And by I say back to, I mean to 500K. At least that would mean we got to get back above 123, the old all-time high here that just happened last month in August. And so, I don't know. I think it's an interesting time. Certainly, if you're in the market right now, you think that this has a lot more room to run. And that's where we go to next because, I don't know if it's fair to say a warning sign. There are people in our community, by the way, who, again, just to explain where we're coming from on this, Coinage being a decentralized community of a lot of different people, permissionless for anyone to mint and join our co-op and own Coinage with us, in our token-gated Telegram, telling us to cover what we're about to get into, which I think is important context because, again, we don't really have, we do have an agenda in terms of being a crypto DAO here in the US who believe in this technology. Coinage is built here for a reason. Believe in this technology and can understand why it can do a lot of good things for community ownership as a cooperative here in the US and also for, I think, just making a lot of these businesses more efficient. So look, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to say that, hey, I'm not biased towards the idea of crypto being a positive for America. But a lot of our community members were noticing that no one is really talking too much about the Trump's World Liberty Financial Project and what exactly has been going on with that. And so we decided to step up. We decided to take a look. We decided to dig into a little bit of this. And over the weekend, just want to bring up the chart. Over the weekend, and I guess it was technically yesterday, so it's Labor Day, but World Liberty Financial launching, and right now trading at 22 cents, just thereabout. And when you dig into that, it was a much healthier debut before then in the early trading hours. And again, being listed on Binance mostly first here, and then added by Coinbase thereafter. 40 cents is where it was around, and then quickly fell, traded down lower throughout the day from 30 cents, fell down, thought it was going to hold around 25, at least that's what it looked like. And now here we are at 22 cents. The reason why we're showing this chart is because right before this all went down, about 2 weeks ago, is Zach Witkoff, the co-founder of World Liberty Financial, and also now the chairman over at, maybe I should bring this chart up too, over at Alt5 Sigma, the treasury company that is tied to World Liberty Financial. So Zach Witkoff and other co-founders, as well as Eric Trump on that board, designed to take Alt5 Sigma and scoop up World Liberty Financial tokens. That stock currently down about 26% in morning trading, so that's not good. And why is it not good? Because just 2 weeks ago, you had Zach Witkoff on CNBC talking about where these tokens were going to trade, how it was going to be a huge thing for Alt5 Sigma because they had been receiving these tokens at a discount from one Trump entity, World Liberty Financial, to another. And that was going to be huge, going to be accretive for shares. And you basically got the opposite, trading below, not yet, but as he says in this clip we're about to play, Alt5 Sigma got those tokens, the WLFI tokens, at 20 cents. And so at 22 cents, we are very close to seeing it trade exactly where they were supposed to get it on the cheap. And so if it falls below that, they didn't even get anything good out of this inside kind of one entity to one entity transaction. And so I just want to play the context. 2 weeks ago, the bullishness that was there on CNBC about World Liberty Financial. And now where has it gone? Take a listen to what Zach Witkoff said just a few weeks ago.
I'll add to that, Joe. If you look at the pre-market, I looked at it right before I stepped on set for the World Liberty Financial token. Our token trades somewhere between 35 and 90 cents. That represents a $35 to $90 billion fully diluted valuation. Alt5 Sigma acquired these tokens at a 20-cent valuation. If you take the simple average of the pre-market trading, Joe, you come up with a valuation around 56 cents. That means that based on Alt5's acquisition, they acquired these tokens around a 64% discount, which we think is going to be quite accretive for shareholders. It also means that based on yesterday's closing price, our NAV is trading somewhere around 0.6 to 0.2.
And now, as we sit here looking at where it's trading, again, on the candle chart, I think a little bit more interesting to take a look at, that's kind of where we are, 22 cents, and dropping, I suppose. And so it's a question of whether or not, by the way, I mean, I think the idea of $22 billion in a fully diluted value, not small, right? And probably something that only like the Trumps could do. So let's just at least throw that out there in that certainly this project, again, it's a very low float. Keep in mind, early investors in this project only saw, I think the percentage was like 20% of their tokens unlock. And so it's still a small float. And from there, kind of TBD on whether or not there's going to be any demand for this. I think, again, the key component to where this all goes is what we just tried to cover, is that at the heart of all this is a digital dollar that has become the fastest growing stable coin. Of course, on that same interview, that was the main focus of what is World Liberty Financial's main piece that it holds over other crypto projects, is that they're launching and have already launched the fastest growing stablecoin in history. Took them only 90 days to get to a $2 billion market cap. And it seems that there's still a lot more things to come when it comes to USD1. So much so that I believe over here, where is it? Where could it be? It wasn't too long ago that their site already had this be the top of everything. Was USD1. Here it is. You got to go over here to see it now. But this is the next big thing up, is I think the announcements that will come off of USD1. And look, you got to give them credit in terms of where this project seems to understand where they're going next when it comes to USD1, because if you think about the equivalent in TradFi, it's credit card points, it's all kinds of things. You heard the co-founders in that same CNBC interview floating the idea of starting to issue rewards for people using USD1, and there is a positive flywheel effect. The more that USD1 gets adopted, the more World Liberty Financial stands to gain. Somewhat important to highlight that maybe some of that does not go entirely back to token holders, and still a lot to be determined in terms of what that's going to look like. Certainly the rest of crypto also trying to figure that out. We here at Coinage, as a U.S. cooperative, maybe ahead of the game in terms of figuring out, hey, it's a lot easier just to say, here's our DAO wallet, here's all the money that goes into it, and at the end of the year as a co-op, we can figure out who's active among our community members and distribute a patronage dividend back to them. All these other crypto projects right now are kind of trying to figure out, do we buy and burn our token? What's the deal? And a lot of that gets messy. A lot of it gets messy because the earlier people that are into your project might be the least involved, and you're suddenly rewarding a lot of token holders that don't do jack shit. And so, I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see where this one goes, but I think from a broader macro perspective, and when I say macro, I mostly only mean crypto enthusiasm for right now. From that perspective, pretty interesting to see what we heard from Zach Witkoff not play out in terms of almost at 20 cents. That discount for Alt 5 Sigma has dissipated, or at least is very close to fully dissipating. And not surprisingly, that's why you're seeing the stock down 26%. And so I don't know what happens from here. A question of whether or not Alt 5 Sigma steps in and starts to buy some of the World Liberty Financial tokens off the open market, whether or not they're able to raise more money now to do that, or whether or not, by the way, and what we cover in our piece, whether or not the Trumps lean on some of their connections here. There were some rumors, and I don't know if this is just kind of launch strategy here, but some rumors looking at the Saudis, whether or not they want to do anything with their own digital finance or digital treasury company built around WLFI, and whether or not some of that money goes into an Alt 5 Sigma. I think there's still a lot of questions to be answered. But at the very least, that's why we went out on the street. We have a clip from our recent piece, because part of the reason here is that no one really knows. I think that's why the Witkoffs and the Trumps have been going out on Fox, on all these different news publications like CNBC, to try and explain, hey, look, there's a huge opportunity here. And what we're being able to grow, and no one else has the president being part of the inspiration of a project like World Liberty Financial. So you guys should be aware. And when we went out, this was at Washington Square Park here in New York, we went out and just kind of man on the street, asked a bunch of people, hey, are you aware of the Trump's plans with USD1 and World Liberty Financial? Unsurprisingly, perhaps, no one did know about that. Even a guy who we talked to that was very familiar with crypto, just didn't know. And so just wanted to play a little bit of flavor on the street because we were surprised to get out there and ask people about it. And almost nobody knew, but here were their takes on what it means for America as we investigated a little bit more about the Trumps and their own digital dollar. Take a listen. Do you think it'd be weird if here in America we use like a Trump dollar versus like a Democrat dollar?
Yes, I do. Because I think although money fuels politics in some way, most people don't view money when they use it as something political.
I think as a nation, we want to be more together than apart, to have these different ways of, I don't know, I'm using this currency, you're using that currency, then that says something about me or something about you. I don't think we need that. Like currency at the end of the day is a tool of trade. Why should we not have a standard way within the country? To have that multiple currency within the nation seems like more of a tool for division versus uniting us.
The question we're asking people is like whether or not they think a president should be able to launch his own dollar.
If he wants to do it, he's introducing something new, I'm always down to consider change. Just because we've done something the same way forever doesn't mean that change can make it better.
So there you go. And again, our piece is not necessarily saying one way or the other. we leave that to you. So go watch the full piece if you haven't. Just posted on YouTube. So if you want to watch it there, or if you want to buy a Coinage NFT and watch it on our site ad-free, by all means, that would also help us out here too. So like, share, get that going out there. That rhymed. Because I think it's an important piece, at least to educate people, as we saw on the street. Not too many people have thought about some of these questions that are now being raised, particularly for those who are here in the country, what it means for America, and for people who might be looking at USD1 or World Liberty Financial around the world, what it might mean to them as investors in the project. And so a lot to dig into there. One final point on this, though, as I want to kind of highlight it too, is people who are kind of watching some of our coverage also flagging perhaps one of the reasons why we've seen muted interest in World Liberty Financial as it got kicked off was a discrepancy in terms of how much would be floated out there on the open market, or at least displayed in that sense of, if you go back to the chart, Texas, real quick on this one, this number here, which is circulating supply. Pretty interesting to kind of see an update after or right as the token came out. You had a Medium post from the World Liberty Financial team saying, hey, look, hope we didn't catch anyone by surprise, but on CoinMarketCap, that number was supposed to be, or at least was listed as 5 billion, and then all of a sudden on launch day, it got increased quite a bit. And so the World Liberty Financial team put out a post on Medium kind of explaining the circulating supply at launch. And so that is a pretty important piece, I think, to the story too, is that all of a sudden, if you have a lot of people who are waiting for this token to come out, expecting to see $5 billion in terms of floating supply, and then all of a sudden it's actually closer to 25 billion, that might have caught people off guard a little bit. But nonetheless, the World Liberty Financial team posting a Medium post to clarify why that was. CoinMarketCap's CEO also kind of clamoring to put that thread out and highlight why that was as well. So maybe could be a piece of those jitters. So just wanted to highlight that in the full context of everything that came out, because, I don't know, some people were hitting us up saying, hey, look, this is why I'm a little bit peeved about this and why the launch wasn't as strong. No wonder. It's 5x what tokens we were supposed to see at launch. So anyways, just flagging that from the CEO of CoinMarketCap too, as he also tried to explain all this in real time. So anyways, we'll continue to track that and see if anything changes. But for now, a little bit tamer launch than expected as World Liberty Financial's token gets out the gate and becomes tradable. We'll see if any of that changes again, as Alt 5 Sigma potentially makes their plans more clear this week. That's what's going on in, I guess, the temperature check, the heat check in the crypto space itself, somewhat akin to a public market IPO, which we got a big one coming up. If you follow these exchanges and these IPOs, of course, Circle, USDC issuer, kind of set the trend and set the enthusiasm in their IPO launch earlier this year. Then we had Bullish come out, huge day one pop. The enthusiasm's been cranking, basically the antithesis of everything you just saw from WLFI on the public market side. But now, what do we have? Lo and behold, our final topic of the day, Texas. We got Gemini coming out as well. And the news there, pretty interesting. We finally got pricing on where the Winklevoss's Gemini IPO will be placed. And we're looking at them raising $317 million in their IPO. And importantly, to highlight on that one, $17 to $19 each for the shares, $16.7 million to be offered in this bad boy. At the top of that range, as Bloomberg notes, Gemini could have a market value of about $2.2 billion based on shares outstanding. And again, going to be a high watermark to top what we saw from Circle. That out of the gate, 170%, as we highlighted back then. Bullish, 84% in its debut. And so kind of a curious question for what happens with Gemini out of the gate when they list. And as we highlighted a couple weeks ago, when you dug into their S1 and kind of looked at their updated financials, not exactly the sexiest, Texas, if we still have that graphic. It was a widening net loss over last year, at least when you compare the first 6 months of this year. And so as far as numbers go, not the best, but it's still one of the few publicly traded exchanges as it comes out. And so does that matter, really, at the end of the day? Especially if you believe it's a hot space. And so the timing of this one, in down temper, nonetheless, might indicate some confidence there. If anyone knows what's cranking, it's probably the Winklevoss twins. They're in the White House all the time, got a very good relationship with Trump. They're probably seeing what World Liberty Financial's got cooking up, no doubt. And so pretty interesting to think about coming out now in what, to go full circle with where we opened, is a historically soft period for crypto. And again, with everything going on, would it be terribly surprising to see a break from the norms? We've got twins in the White House talking about Gemini. We've got the IPO coming out. And we've got all this cranking. We've got, go back to that chart off the top, Texas, just to bring it full circle, the one with the hypotenuse, the exponential rise in DATs buying crypto. You put the pieces together, and maybe not all that crazy to think about why the Winklevoss twins and Gemini might want to come out in what is historically a soft period, but we are not in the same ecosystem as we once were, I think is fair to say. We are in a different time. We're in a different time where the president of the United States is fully committed to making the U.S. the crypto capital of the world. The big question we leave you with in our final piece, if you haven't watched it yet, go to YouTube, check it out, is what that means, what it means moving forward, and whether or not it can be kept up, as we saw just yesterday with the WLFI token launch. Big questions around whether or not it can be kept up. And it's just a microcosm. One digital asset treasury company around one token, but we've got these now for Bitcoin and ETH and everything cranking. How long can it be kept up? That is the question. We'll leave it there. As always, you can check out all the big headlines in and around the world of Web3 at our site at coinage.media. If you like this, please go ahead and throw a like, throw a retweet, share it, tell your friends. If you haven't subscribed to our Substack, by all means, it's free. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel on YouTube, by all means, stay up to date. Slap on those bells, turn on noties, whatever it is the kids are saying these days. For everybody here at Coinage, I'm Zach Guzman signing off. We'll see you again soon.